Oh, that's right. But you can even do better than that. If you go to the Democratic Party's website, they say that their two founders of their party were Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, both of whom owned upwards of 150, 200 slaves each. And they weren't particularly nice about being slave owners either. One of the things I discovered is that one of Andrew Jackson's slaves ran away from him, and he put an ad in the newspapers saying, not only will I pay you to bring back the slave, but I will pay you an extra $10, which was a lot of money in 1820s, for each 100 lashes you give to this slave as punishment for running away, up to 300 lashes. 300 lashes. Andrew Jackson, President of the United States.
Well, often the Democrat Party honors Jackson with their Jackson Day dinners, correct?
That's right. The Jefferson-Jackson Day dinners are the main fundraising vehicles for the Democratic Party in every state in the United States.
Today. Now, who was the president when Martin Luther King Jr. was wiretapped, who would have to be perceived as one of the great leaders of America, claimed by the Democrat Party? Who was the president, and what attorney general wiretapped Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, of course, you're referring to John F. Kennedy, who promised as soon as he was elected, he was going to immediately send a civil rights bill to Congress. 1961, nothing. 1962, nothing. Finally, in 1963, Martin Luther King organized a march on Washington, a famous march. Its main purpose was to put pressure on Kennedy to do something on civil rights. And, of course, his brother Robert was the Attorney General. And back in those days, the Attorney General could authorize wiretaps on his own authority. You didn't have to go to a judge to do that.
Right.
And he was the one who signed the order allowing the FBI to wiretap and bug the hotel rooms of Martin Luther King Jr.
Then in the mid-1960s, what national party did everything in the Senate, including filibustering, to stop the passage of the 64 and 65 civil rights legislations? That would have been what party?
Well, of course, a majority of Democrats in the Senate voted against the Civil Rights Act of '64, and that legislation would not have passed except that virtually every Republican supported that legislation. And it's worth remembering that one of the people who filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1964, he spoke for 14 straight hours against that legislation, was Robert C. Byrd, a member of the Ku Klux Klan, who to this day serves in the United States Senate.
And, of course, in the 1980s, when Ted Kennedy and others had to elect a Democratic leader of the U.S. Senate, who did the Democrats turn to in the 1980s to represent their hopes, dreams, and aspirations?
Well, you're talking again about Robert C. Byrd, who was the Senate Minority Leader. Then he was the Senate Majority Leader, and today serves as President pro tem of the United States Senate.
The media often talks about Nixon's infamous Southern strategy. Do you hear the media talking about any of this stuff?
No, not at all. And of course, Nixon is smeared by this charge because in 1968 he didn't run the Southern strategy. It was George Wallace who ran a third-party campaign, Democrat of Alabama. He ran the Southern strategy, and one of the very first things that Nixon did when he was elected was to institute a comprehensive policy for desegregating the schools in the South, which the Democrats had talked about but never actually did anything about. And Nixon was even the one who created affirmative action. Now, you can say affirmative action is a bad idea if you want to, but it's kind of stupid to attack Nixon on the one hand for being a racist for the Southern strategy when he was, in fact, the one who created affirmative action.
Richard Milhouse Nixon created affirmative action in 1971.
That's right. And one of the strongest opponents of affirmative action at that time was Robert C. Byrd, who tried to get a legislation passed that would prevent Nixon from instituting affirmative action.
Well, would you think the African Americans voting Democratic are simply stupid, misinformed, or are they so exploited they can't understand who their masters are?
Well, I think that they're in the worst possible situation right now because the Democrats take them totally for granted. They just don't expend any effort whatsoever to actually help African Americans. And unfortunately, the Republicans don't either because they think that it's so hopeless to get any African American votes that they just don't even try. So if there's a worst possible political situation for African Americans to be in, I don't know what it is.
Well, we have to run. The book is Wrong on Race. It's going up all the charts. It's a great read. Bruce Bartlett, you're a great American, and thanks for coming on the Bill Cunningham Show.
Thank you very much.